going to have in this country in the coming weeks and months. I think the graphic nature of this crime, and it being so horrible, and that this young man killed innocent children, and seemed to delight in it, that's going to definitely lead us to that conversation about gun control. It's I don't know where we end up there, but if that's all we do, then we're going to miss a lot, because it's not the sole cause of the issues, and we've talked about that this morning. And we may have to have the conversation with our kids or grandkids about what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut on Friday. So how do you think we should approach that and handle it? Bill Haywood is with me this morning. Bill's been a minister for 30 years. He's the preaching minister for the Abingdon Church of Christ. Bill, how do we approach this subject, and what can we say to ease kids' concerns?
Well, I think that folks have already got a little bit of a grasp on it. One of the things we need to do is just kind of crystallize our thinking a little bit. The theme that I've been hearing, I haven't heard the whole program this morning, but the last several callers, and you mentioned it yourself, that there's a desensitizing that's going on, and that we need to protect ourselves and our children. Our children really need to be protected, and we need to protect their innocence. And, obviously, before this tragedy ever occurred, we need to be careful about what they watch on TV and the things that they hear on the radio and things of this nature. But now, with this particular situation, how do we deal with it? As adults, we need to be having the kind of dialogue that we're having this morning, and we need to process these things. These are very difficult concepts for us to understand. Our children do not need to be part of this diet of dialogue. A child, well, I'll pick an arbitrary age, I'll say 12, and it varies, either way a little bit. But we'll say 12 years old. Prior to about 12 years of age, a child cannot process abstract concepts. And so it's really a very little benefit for a parent to sit down and try to explain all the philosophical ramifications. We need to talk in very concrete terms. When our children ask us questions, we need to be very measured about our answers, but we need to be honest. And if a child asks a question, there's some questions that are tough questions that I feel very comfortable giving a long, drawn-out theological answer to, but it's not really going to benefit that child. Why would God let this happen? That's a tough question. Again, I've got some answers for that, but for a child, I think we need to be honest and say, I don't know all the answers, but I know that there's a God. I know that there are evil people, but there are also more good people. And I know that there were a lot of good people on that day, and that they stepped up and they did some wonderful things. One of the things I would say, Steve, is that especially at a time like this, we need to be very careful about what we expose our children to. It's really, you can turn on now with our cable news networks, you can have a steady diet of this 24 hours a day. I'm not sure that adults really need a steady diet of this. We do need to be having this dialogue, and we do need to be processing these things and working toward what direction we're going to push our culture in. But we need to be careful about how much we obsess on this as well, and there's some times that we need to back off. And one of the things that I would suggest for families is that as we go through this national process of grieving, and that's exactly what it is. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Paul said that we need to grieve, but he says, do not grieve as those who have no hope. We don't need to get into some kind of downward spiral that we can't pull out of. And so as we go through this national grieving process, and obviously for us who are geographically farther away, it's not going to be the same as those who are there at Sandy Hook, but we need to realize that we need to have some non-consequential time with our families, happy time with our families. There's an old saying, the family that prays together stays together. There's also a better saying than that, and that would be the family that prays together and plays together stays together. And you need to set aside some time. If you have children that are been exposed to this and concerned about it, deal with it, and then try to move on to spend some time playing together. turn the TV off, to get the board games out, do some fun things, and spend some of that fun, non-consequential time together, which ends up being very consequential. Because again, our children's innocence. It's so important for us to protect this. But let me go through something you were saying just a few moments ago. You know, a lot of these programs, and I'm guilty of this as well. There's a lot of programs that I just have to really question how healthy they are, even for me, to be watching. And we need to analyze. Okay, am I giving my child a good emotional, intellectual diet in what we watch on TV and the things that allow them to be exposed to? And that's kind of a secondary issue, but it gets back to this idea we need to protect their innocence as much as possible.
It is a serious parental responsibility to pay attention to what our kids are being exposed to, both in television, video games, and it's not something that we can afford to fall down on, because it puts them in situations that they're not prepared to be in at their age. One of the things, Bill, that we see with young children, you mentioned earlier that they don't have, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they don't have a complex response. It's generally a pretty simple response, and in a lot of cases it's sadness. They're sad for the kids and the school personnel that were lost in the tragedy. How can parents and grandparents deal with that sadness?
Well, I would say, first of all, don't try to put a lid on that, but at the same time, don't try to fan those flames of sadness either. Let it be a very natural process. Again, don't overexpose them to all the details. As an adult, I don't need to know that. Now, there's some people that may want to know this information, or for some reason need to know this information, but I don't need to know the particular type of bullet and the damage that a particular type of bullet would do. I don't need that, and your children certainly don't need that. But let them have a natural process on this, and then try to find some ways to turn this upward. And I think one of the things that would be very positive is to have the conversation with your children. Evil is overcome with good. Are there some good things that we can do? There's a great quote that I love. David Henry Thoreau said, for every 1,000 hacking at the leaves, there's one hacking at the roots of evil. And so one of the things that we can do is ask our children, okay, what's something positive we can do to try to combat the evil in the world? Because there is evil in the world, and your children need to know that. You would be raising naive children. It's one thing to shelter your children. It's another thing to isolate your children, and that's not healthy. And so, yes, there is evil in the world, but what's something good that we could do? Could we go to the nursing home and visit some people that maybe we don't even know, or maybe there's some shut-ins from church, or maybe one of the neighbors over here needs us to wash their windows. And, this is something that's very positive that could come out of this. Every human being needs acceptance, needs significance, and needs security, and that happens in the context of relationships. As a parent, we have the responsibility to provide that for our children. Our primary emphasis this morning, we're talking about providing security for our children. Our children need that sense of security. It's going to be all right. And so we need to talk to them and say, I know you're sad. You may be concerned, but this, and again, I realize these events are happening, but and I don't mean to trivialize anything, but in the big scheme of things, they are rare. They are rare, and we need to tell our children these do not happen all the time.
Is there a point at which, based upon what kids are asking or they want to talk about, that we advise them to take a step further and talk to the school counselor or talk to their pastor?
Well, yeah, you really, as a parent, and knowing your child, you need to assess that. And I would definitely say, don't try to put a lid on their emotions. I would say, don't fan the flames of their emotions. Mm-hmm. And it may be that they need to have a conversation with their school counselor or with your minister. And oftentimes. And if they need to verbalize these things, that's fine. Different people process things different ways. And it tends to be very healthy. If your child wants to verbalize these things, allow them to do that. Verbalize their concerns. And oftentimes we make the mistake as parents that we want to fix their problems. They don't necessarily need the problem fixed. They just need to express their feelings. And so it may be appropriate to have them to meet with a minister or a counselor.
Bill, thanks for taking the time this morning. Bill Haywood is the preaching minister for the Abingdon Church of Christ. I appreciate your comments and you're calling in to chat this morning, Bill. Thank you. I need to take a break here, and I'll take your calls, 800-469-0098, 276-4.